Triangle is a 2009 release psychological horror directed by Christopher Smith. And before we start talking about the actual film, if you stick around to the end of this video, we've got something different. We actually talk about time travel. Because we've done a month of time travel films, we go off on one, as we always do, but we really go off on one. We start talking about time travel, the genre, and we pick some other films. So do stick around to the end of the video.
It stars Melissa George as Jess. She's a single mother who looks after an autistic son. She's got going on a boat trip with her friend Greg and his brother and his wife and a friend who are just going to go out on the seas just for a nice sunny day out. As the film begins and Jess gets onto the boat, she's looking a bit apprehensive, but we don't really know why. As the trip progresses, she has a sleep for some reason. She's just very tired. They're having a nice old time. The champagne's flowing, but unfortunately, the frivolity is cut short when the wind suddenly drops. So the boat stops dead in the water, and then off in the distance they can see some ominous-looking clouds, and what looks like a nasty electrical storm heading their way. The water was completely calm. It suddenly is rough, and the boat is being thrown all over the place, as are those on board. Until unfortunately it capsizes. They find themselves on the bottom of the upturned boat, awaiting rescue. Not long after, a cruise ship appears. They can see somebody on board, and they sort of wave and shout. This person doesn't really react, sort of turns around and walks away. But they manage to get on the boat, but it seems to be deserted. There's nobody there. Again, Jess appears a bit confused. She seems to be experiencing some deja vu. She seems like the boat is familiar to her, but she can't pinpoint why. They start looking for some sign of life on the boat, and they come to a ballroom and there's food in there. So it appears that this boat is occupied, but by who they can't figure it out. But then they start to experience some strange things. They see people out the corner of their eye, and they find them, and then they find a message in blood on a mirror that tells them to go to the theatre. As we proceed through the film, the mystery sort of deepens. It's another one of these films where to talk too much about the plot would spoil it. It's better to go in knowing as little as possible, because there are lots of twists and turns and reveals. Knowing about them would yes, definitely spoil it.
Yes, much like last week's Predestination. It's not really a lot we can talk about.
No.
So where do we go from here?
I mean, obviously, we're doing it in Time Travel Week, so that gives you a big hint as to sort of what happens to the characters. I mean, it's kind of a time loop rather than a time. I mean, there's no time machine per se, so there's no sort of there's no mechanic as to why things are happening and why there's a loop or anything like that. But it's not a loop like Groundhog Day where everything resets to exactly how it was.
I mean, I would argue that it's not about time travel at all.
Well, possibly not. No.
I mean, without talking at any great length about the plot of the film, I would argue that there's no time travel here, and it's not a time loop. I mean, the title suggests. So the title is Triangle, which would suggest, well, we're out at sea, so Bermuda Triangle. Yeah,
I mean, that's definitely the intention, although it's nowhere near Bermuda.
No, it's not, but obviously that would suggest either like a time loop or even paradox universe. But if you get to the end of this film, well, depending on what you know or what you don't know, I think it might suggest something else. I mean, without giving anything away, and this might give something away, I saw someone was reviewing it, and they suggested a better title would be Circle, which I think could actually be a better title, because there's different kind of references there to maybe time loops, but also something else as well, which I think, and that something else is what I think this film is about.
Yeah, there's references to Greek mythology in there. The boat itself is called Aeolus. And he was the father to Sisyphus, and he was punished by Hades, and he pushed a large boulder up a hill only to see it roll down again, and he would then have to go back to the bottom and push it all the way up again, and it was just, again, an endless loop of doing the same thing over and over again. So there's a pretty big hint there.
There's lots of references, I think, to history and poetry and folklore and things like that. I think it's one of those films there's lots of like references and ideas and different philosophies and things like that. There's also a lot of references to The Shining, almost too many. I mean, the big one is obviously Room 237, and then obviously, you know, bloody messages on mirrors and ballrooms
And the corridors
and
things
corridors
like that,
and all that kind of stuff. And you're watching it and you're like, all right, okay, we get that you like The Shining, but this is not The Shining.
It's fair enough, you know, if you love that film and you want to pay homage to it, that's fair enough. But yeah, maybe it does a little bit too much.
It's too much because it's like,
yeah.
because everyone knows what The Shining's about. So it's like, well, okay, that's a psychological thriller. Obviously, going into this film, you know you're entering that kind of territory anyway. But sometimes it's a bit like, do you know when it gets just like you put too many of your favourite references to films in there? I mean, I wouldn't say there's any references to other films apart from films like this. I mean, I quite enjoyed it, I have to say. You were expecting me not to like it, I don't think.
I can never tell, so I always expect the worst.
I mean, I really like Christopher Smith's other films. I mean, he made Severance, which I absolutely love. And he also made Creep, which had Sean Harris, who played Ian Curtis in 24 Hour Party People, that we also covered. He also made Black Death, which was kind of a film set in the Dark Ages, which I really liked. I mean, he's made some really interesting films. This film, it wasn't necessarily original. It's quite dark at times. I think it does some interesting things. I mean, I kind of, how I felt was I got to the end of it and I thought, I'm glad I saw it, but it's not one I'll probably go and watch in a hurry again.
Well, I think it's a film that would reward repeated viewings because of its nature. And I think Melissa George, you know, puts in a pretty good performance. I mean, she's from start to end, she's in a perpetual state of, well, distress, I suppose, confusion, bemusement.
She plays it really well, and I was on board. I mean, I think sometimes with these films sometimes the acting can be a bit ropey, and if you don't go with the actors, especially the lead who you're with for most of the movie, it can be a bit off-putting. But I thought she did it really well. I have to say, the only thing that was off-putting to me, so obviously Christopher Smith is British, but the majority, this is clearly filmed in Australia because all the cast are Australians, but they're clearly playing in America, and I was just like, why? Because weirdly, when at the beginning of the film, when it opens up and Melissa George, she's at home with her son, it's almost like Neighbours. Because if you know, I've never been to Australia, but obviously I've grown up watching things like Neighbours and Home and Away. If you know what those houses in their streets are like, you instantly think of Australia. You don't think of America, even though the car in the driveway is clearly an American car, with the, you know, because obviously the Australians drive on the same side as us, but in America they don't. So obviously they've got an American car in there. It just, to me, and that's a personal thing, to me it felt like, I knew they were in Australia, I knew they weren't in America, and although the accents were, I suppose, convincing enough, I just kind of thought, why set it in America? Why not set it in Australia?
I guess, you know, for to be able to sell it better in that territory, you know, America is the big territory, isn't it, to sell your movie in?
Yeah, of course.
You know, obviously China these days as well, but no, that's the big one. So that's the main reason, I think.
Yeah, like I said, I enjoyed it. It was odd because I think certainly when they were outside the boat, they were filming on a boat. When they're inside it, I'm not sure, because there are certain scenes, certain corridors didn't feel like boat corridors. They felt like kind of hotel corridors.
I think most of it was built. They were sets built. I mean, they built where they were filming. There's like a spit, and they built, you know, sort of part of the boat on the end of the spit. So when when they filmed, it would be sea all around it as they filmed outwards.
Right.
And obviously, you know, because all the corridors look very similar, you can have, you only need to build so many, and then you can just film them all from different angles and make it appear that they're different corridors.
But I wasn't being negative. Or what I was actually going to say was that although some parts of when they were on the boat didn't feel like a boat to me, it did give it a kind of ethereal quality. There was these quite interesting lights being used, which did make it feel quite kind of off kilter for me. So I certainly don't think it was a negative thing. I don't know how intentional that was, but it certainly looked quite out of place for me and dreamlike. I mean, the film is quite dreamlike to a point.
I mean, the lights in the corridor, because they literally built the corridors, there wasn't really any room for lighting, film lights. Yeah. So they literally used the light fittings as the light sources. So, the art, the sort of the person that built the set was responsible for lighting those scenes effectively.
Yeah.
So, which, gives it a slightly different feel to a normal setup.
Yeah, I mean, so, like I said, I enjoyed it. I think there were better films set on boats. I think I can think of one that comes to mind, which was obviously made and set in Australia, which was Dead Calm with Nicole Kidman. That's an unbelievable film, incredible film. Obviously, that's not this film; it's very different.
No.
But it's just one that kind of came to mind with the Australian link there. I thought this was okay. I mean, you talk about. Well, I was talking about references. I mean, Time Crimes is one that I've seen a lot of people reference. Obviously, there is a character in this with a mask on, like a bag over his head. Obviously, that's not what's in Time Crimes. I was reading an interview with Chris. It's similar. I was reading an interview with Christopher Smith, who kind of said that this. He didn't specifically say he wasn't talking about Time Crimes, but I think he came up with the idea of this like before Time Crimes. And I think there was a point that he was saying there were quite a few films like Moon. Primer is another one that kind of, they all came out around the same time, and he said, maybe it was kind of part of the zeitgeist. You often find that, don't you? You often find lots of similar movies all come along at the same time, and it's not because they're all copying each other, it's just because that's what's going on in the world, So there are links to Time Crimes there. I think you can certainly see them, but I don't know whether that's intentional or not. It wasn't amazing, it wasn't that original, but it wasn't terrible, and they clearly had a lot of fun making it. And it's quite gory. There's a couple of scenes in here which I was like, oh my god, what the hell? And I quite like strange surreal imagery. I mean, there's nothing. I wouldn't say it's on a par with like a film like Jacob's Ladder, which is very surreal horror, or Nightmare on Elm Street or something like that. But there are certainly moments in here which kind of made me go, oh dear, that's quite creepy. And so I went with it. I enjoyed it, and it made me think as well. And that's always a good sign if a mind F movie can make you think, and it certainly did, I think, for me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we did Predestination last week, and I sort of complained that gives you too much information that allows you to figure out what's going to happen at the end. Whereas I think this one, there's little tiny hints here and there, but it never really gives you enough to sort of figure out exactly what's going on. I mean, you by a certain point you could probably have a decent guess, but no. I mean, I've seen this once before. It was a few years ago, but no, I don't remember guessing anything, to be honest. The reveals all came as a surprise. I mean, there are, as with any film like this, there's going to be some little plot holes maybe, and because it is loops and then stuff sort of interweaves and things like that, it's done in a way that you can follow it, but it's established at one point that things could be changed, things can play out differently, but then that's kind of forgotten, and then everything starts playing out as it did again. That was briefly explored, but yeah, like I say, it was left. So I mean, it certainly made it more interesting, because if you just see the same thing over and over again, it would get a bit dull. So they have to introduce the sort of being able to change things, so you don't know what's coming. I thought that was an interesting dynamic that was kind of forgotten about. I mean, I guess because it is like a loop, you've got to get back to the. I don't know. I can't. It's difficult to say without ruining it. If you think, like with any of these time travel, time loop films, if you think too hard, then some things start to make you scratch your head and think, well, how does that work? If you just go with it, it's a fun ride, I think, with some unexpected twists.
I would definitely recommend, if you haven't seen this, then give it a shot, give it a watch. I watched it on Amazon Prime, which is where you can watch it at the moment. Have you got it? Do you have it?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I got the Blu-ray a few years ago. Yeah, I mean, it's got some decent extras on it. There's quite a lengthy making of, lots of interviews with people, behind the scenes, and like I said, it shows the building of the set, and lots of interviews with the cast and things like that. How Christopher Smith came up with the idea. Apparently he was at Cannes, and they were looking out, onto the sea, and they could see a cruise ship, and the idea just popped into his head about, a woman who's on a cruise ship, and then the loop idea came to him, and I think it took him a year or two to write it. I mean, it obviously, the more he got into it, the more difficult it was to write, because it is quite convoluted. I think the Aussie disc is the same, has all the same stuff on it. Obviously, being a British-Australian co-production, that's why they get the good stuff. Unfortunately, the US disc, I think it has trailers, and that's about it. It's not a particularly unknown film, not difficult to pick it up on DVD or Blu-ray, cheap, or it is streaming as well, like you say, on Amazon. So easy one to find to watch if you want to check it out.
So that was the end of our time travel month. Hope you enjoyed that one. We're not quite sure. We've got a couple of ideas for next month, but one thing we thought was, maybe we'd have a quick chat about time travel, the genre or the theme of time travel, and maybe talk about some other movies. And of course, what time travel films do you guys like? And we obviously only covered 5 this month. There are plenty of other ones out there. What are your favourite ones? What if we ever did another themed month for time travel? What would you like us to cover in the future? I think someone actually suggested we do Triangle. So there you go. We've done it. Hope you enjoyed it. There's obviously the famous ones. The Back to the Future is obviously the trilogy is probably the most famous. Well, I mean, one could argue that the Time Machine, by H.G. Wells. I mean, time travel is such an interesting thing, but it's almost like it kind of started with H.G. Wells. I mean, that's almost like the original, unless there were ones before that. I can't think of any. I actually read a short novel which I think was published a few years after the Time Machine, and that was called Golf in the Year 2000. It was very weird. It was like a love for golf, which I certainly don't have myself. But it was about a man he gets into this pod and he wakes up 100 years later, and it's the year 2000. And then I think he has a watch that's a bit like a digital watch, and it's one of those books that's quite interesting because there are little things in there that kind of make you think, oh, they predict the future a little bit in that book. Apart from that, and obviously the Time Machine, I don't know if there may well have been philosophies or ideas that may be linked to time travel. It's such an amazing subject because I think all of us, whether we want to go back and change our own lives, or we want to go back and see the world as it was, or even go forward, it's such a, the trouble with life is that none of us, we only get to, if you're lucky, you get to live, 100 years, 90 years, but that's it. You don't get to see what comes next. And I think the whole idea of time travel, to go forward to see what could potentially come in the future, or go back and see what life, did Christ exist? What were the dinosaurs like? All that kind of thing. I actually found on the Internet Movie Database, the first listed film with time travel in is The Ghost of Slumber Mountain, which was made in 1918, which is a short animation. And it says, in a dream, Uncle Jack looks through a magic telescope owned by the ghost of a hermit and sees what life was like millions of years ago, including a battle between prehistoric monsters. So that's kind of, that's almost like looking, you're not travelling back, but you're looking back. And there have been so many instances of great time travel ideas in films. Too many to mention now. I mean, what are some of the ones that we missed that you like?
I mean, obviously, Terry Gilliam's visited it a couple of times, hasn't he, with Time Bandits and 12 Monkeys. I mean, they're both a lot of fun. I mean, I like the fact that it sort of stretches across all genres.
It does.
You've got comedy films like Hot Tub Time Machine. There's rom-coms. I mean, we covered the Vincent D'Onofrio film, Happy Accidents, that's it, yeah. Time Traveller's Wife, and horror and sci-fi, and it crops up in all sorts of genres. And obviously, it can be used in lots of different ways. So sometimes it'll be time travel is sort of the main plot. Other times it's just there to sort of drive the story forward, and it's not really what the film is about. It's just something that is in the film. And there's other things like, in Back to the Future, obviously, we are there for the birth of time travel and the first time that it's used. Other films, it's just an everyday thing. I don't know, like Time Cop, for example. It's obviously well established that time travel is a thing, and that, to the point where they've got time police, and like Predestination that we did. That's he's a temporal agent. It can be used in so many different ways, and I think there is just a fascination with, both with the past, knowing what it was really like and what really happened, and with the future. You never know what's coming. To get some insight on that would be the ultimate knowledge, really, wouldn't it, for all sorts of reasons. I mean, obviously Back to the Future and other time travel films show how that can go wrong. You have knowledge of the future, and it, you think it's going to benefit you, but it actually makes things worse. I think it is just such an endless mine of things that can shape a film in all sorts of different ways. And then you've got obviously the time loop ones like Triangle, and obviously Groundhog Day. I mean, whether they kind of fall under the same thing, because obviously time is being repeated and the character is effectively going back in time, but because they're repeating the same day, I don't know. That obviously they bring memories with them, don't they, of their previous experience of that day. So I don't know. It's a strange one, isn't it? It's not quite time travel, but it's certainly in the same sort of area, I would say. And there's other ones where, you know, people occupy the bodies of people in different times. Source Code, I think, is one where the mind is projected into someone else's body. And Deja Vu, the Denzel Washington film, uses similar kind of thing there. Frequency with Dennis Quaid, where they talk on a radio across time. So there's no kind of time travel as such, but it's two different people from different times communicating as if they're in the same time. And then they've got ones where you don't even realise time travel's going on, like Planet of the Apes, shall we say? Spoiler, he's in the future.
I think time it's a good one for film, isn't it? Because I think another kind of theme for film is memory, and and time are both kind of similar things. I mean, you talk about, you know, time travel existing via many different, you know, over many different genres. I mean, I think it often crops up again in kind of like art house cinema as well. I mean, we covered The Navigator, A Medieval Odyssey, the New Zealand film, which is kind of pushing over towards art house cinema a little bit. I mean, La Jetée, you know, which is the short film from 1962 that 12 Monkeys was inspired by. Terry Gilliam was inspired by that. I mean, that makes use of photography and memory and time and things like that, which is very interesting. Jubilee, the Derek Jarman film, which is like, you know, where Queen Elizabeth jumps forward like 500 years to 1970s punk London, you know, punk rock London. It's an amazing film, but that uses time travel. Orlando is another one with Tilda Swinton, where she asserts the Virginia Woolf novel, you know, and she again similar. She's a woman. I haven't seen it for years, but she basically swaps gender. She travels through time and swaps gender as well. So there's you know, different genres, different types of cinema, different ideas, different philosophies. I mean, it's such an incredible genre. I mean, I love everything from Jubilee to Back to the Future. I love both of those films, and they both tell time travel in completely different ways. So
I tell you what, we haven't even mentioned The Terminator. That's kind of a film where it's time travel. I mean, I guess maybe the most recent one or the one before that uses time travel a lot more, but it's not really about time travel, is it? It's just a device that brings characters together, so to speak. It's even in the Harry Potter film. My daughter's constantly nagging me for us to do a Harry Potter video. I said, no, we won't do that. But I'll mention it. There you go. I've mentioned it, so that'll make her happy. And there's other films where obviously characters meet themselves. You know, that happens in Back to the Future, mentioned again, and Bill and Ted. But something where like Looper, where that is, you know, the main thrust of the plot, where, you know, these sort of what is he? He's like an assassin, isn't he, or a hitman or something? I forget, but it's a while since I've seen it. But all these assassins that are basically, when they come to the end of their usefulness, their older versions are sent back in time and killed by their younger versions, and they're not only are they sent back, but they're sent back with a big bag of money as well, and they sort of retire and they live on that money until they become that older version and get sent back. So there's lots of time travel movies where characters meet older or younger versions of themselves, and obviously some films say, oh no, you mustn't do that, you mustn't touch each other, that'll be a disaster, and other films it's like, it doesn't matter.
I mean, that's you know, we spoke in some of the videos we did about the kind of, you know, these mechanics of Time Machine, and of course, you know, every Time Machine film is different, and of course, you know, when the Time Machine was written, I mean, it doesn't really delve into what should happen or what shouldn't happen, or should you do it. I mean, Back to the Future obviously goes into the whole, you know, we shouldn't do this, we need to destroy the time machine. It just causes too much pain and misery. But the Time Machine, the first novel, or one of the first novels about it, doesn't really delve into those line of questions. No. It delves into other kind of lines of thinking and stuff. But, you know, these paradoxes, and obviously, like I said, you know, it'd be lovely to go back and change something or witness something in your past. But if you actually went back, then yes, you run. Well, do you just jump back and re-experience it, or do you actually physically jump back and risk running into your former self and completely messing everything up? I think that's where time travel is such a good plot device for cinema and stories and art, because it asks questions, and it means that films can go in really crazy. I mean, you think of a film like Tenet. I've not seen Tenet, but obviously that I think plays with time.
Yeah.
And the one, and Christopher Nolan's one before it, what was that one? The one in space, which kind of
Interstellar.
plays...
Yeah, I mean, that plays with time because of black holes and things like that, yeah.
I mean, I watched the other day Sphere, which was kind of, you know, this 90s film with Dustin Hoffman and Sharon Stone, where there's a bit of time travel going on. Event Horizon, there's another one, which is like an amazing film about, you know, a different kind of like going through space. I mean, loads of Red Dwarf. They even did it. They had you put a slide up in your projector and you could just jump in to the past. It was amazing. So you know, so many people have done like things on time travel. It's a great. I think it's possibly one of my favourite genres.
Definitely.
Just such a cool method that you can do with art and film and things. So, you know, obviously you may well have ones that we missed out on. Do let us know which ones you like, and you know, maybe if we do another month, then we can cover them for that.
Also, I think, you know, tell us what your favourite method of time travel is. I mean, obviously a lot of films have, you know, actual time machines, so, you know, Back to the Future and Bill and Ted and things like that, they have, you know, machines that will do the trick. The sun seems to be a big one, like Superman, he doesn't fly around the sun, does he? No, he flies around the earth and makes it go backwards. Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a different method of time travel.
Yep.
Make the earth go backwards. Star Trek, they go around the sun really quick or something. They slingshot around the sun. Again, I don't know what the physics of that is. Spock seems to know what he's doing, but I don't really get how it works. So, you know, a lot of times the time travel is not explained in any way. They'll just have a line of dialogue. Oh yes, there's a temporal fracture or something like that, and it's okay. That's how you can travel through time. So, do you prefer when it's not really explained, or you know, do you like it when there's an actual device that allows them to travel?
So yeah, please, you know, we've probably mentioned quite a lot here, but you know,
we have.
I'm sure we've missed a few.
We will have done. Intentionally, so you can mention them.
Exactly. So let us know, and maybe we'll cover it again one day in the future,
or maybe in the past.
Yes.
Maybe we've already done it.
So that was Triangle, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Hit the subscribe button there and don't forget to push the bell for notifications. There's other videos to check out over here. Come and find us on various social media platforms and join us again soon for another video.